Close your eyes and picture this. Every morning for 6 winters, a shepherd rises, walks to the front of his kennel, and simply watches. He watches puppies leave, seniors fade, volunteers cry, seasons turn. What could keep a heart alive that long? The answer arrives in a phone call, a forest dashed with snow, and a 5-year-old girl whose life depends on a dog no one wanted. Keep watching, because the moment he steps out of that kennel, the world changes in ways even he couldn't have imagined. The metal latch clanked open just past sunrise. It always did. The shelter's long hallway of kennels stirred awake as doors creaked, paws skittered, and barks rose like a morning ritual chorus, each dog announcing itself, pleading for attention, for breakfast, for something to change. But not him. In the far back corner, tucked between 2 younger, louder dogs, a German shepherd sat tall and silent. His name was Coda, at least. That's what they called him now. No one really knew his real name. He didn't bark, didn't pace, didn't press his face against the bars or bounce like the others. Every morning, he simply rose from his blanket, shook out his coat with quiet precision, and stepped forward to sit at the front of his kennel back, straight, ears alert, posture calm, like a soldier waiting for orders that never came. The volunteers called him the gentleman. He had been there for 6 winters. The first year, people noticed him. His thick coat shimmered then, black and tan like charred gold, eyes sharp as pine needles. Some paused, leaned down, even asked to walk him. But something always got in the way, too big, too intense, too quiet. They walked away. Year 2, he started fading from interest. By year 4, no one even asked his name. Dogs came and went in the kennels beside him. Puppies yipped and twirled. Nervous rescues barked constantly. Some dogs stayed a week, some just days. But Coda stayed, and in that passage of time, the signs of waiting etched themselves into his body. His muzzle had turned silver, not from weakness but from time. His hips were a little stiffer now when he stood. But his eyes, those deep, quiet eyes, never lost their alertness, never stopped watching, not just watching for food, not even for freedom. He was waiting for someone. And though no one knew who, Coda never once looked like he'd given up. The staff did what they could. They kept his space clean, gave him soft blankets in winter, a cooling pad in summer. Maggie, the shelter manager, always slipped him a second biscuit in the evenings. "Old man deserves dessert," she'd whisper. Still, the truth settled in every time a family walked down the hallway, past the yapping chaos, and barely spared him a glance. "Why's that one so serious?" a father once muttered. "He looks tired," said a child. The comments echoed. People wanted spark, not stillness. They came looking for happy, not haunting. But Coda kept showing up anyway. Every morning, every evening, sitting quietly, looking out. Sometimes, when the sun hit the floor just right, you could see a shimmer in his eyes, not just reflection, but something buried deeper, as if he was scanning the world through a memory only he could see. He never growled, never flinched when fingers poked through the bars. He let children stroke his fur gently and didn't even blink when the dog next door lunged at the gate. It was the kind of restraint no one trained into him. It was who he was, or maybe who he used to be. Some nights, when the shelter was quiet and the lights dimmed to a low yellow hum, Maggie would walk past and catch him staring, not outward, but upward. Not moving, just listening, like he expected something or someone to return. Across the shelter, life went on. The washing machines thumped. The intercom crackled. Papers were filed. Social media updates went up with photos of playful pups in Halloween costumes or cats sitting in cardboard boxes shaped like race cars. But Coda never made the front page of anything. He was the shadow in the corner, a permanent fixture, the unchosen. He wasn't the saddest dog. He wasn't aggressive or broken. In fact, he was easy. Too easy, maybe. People passed over him the way you walk by something familiar in your house every day. You stop seeing it, even though it's still there. But Maggie saw. So did a few of the volunteers. And Coda saw them too. Every once in a while, when someone slowed in front of his kennel just for a moment, he'd lift his eyes, just enough to meet theirs. Not begging, not hopeful. Just there. Steady. Waiting. And in that gaze was a quiet story no one could quite read. On the 6th winter of Coda's wait, Montana snow clung stubbornly to the chain-link fence outside the shelter. A bitter wind crawled beneath the door cracks. Inside Kennel 28B, Coda sat as he always had, upright, dignified, unmoving. But something was coming. Not loud, not fast, just different. Down the hallway, boots squeaked against linoleum as a new volunteer signed in at the front desk. Her name was Luna. She had no idea her entire life was about to change, and neither did he. The wind had already started clawing at the windows when Luna stepped out of her beat-up Subaru, clutching a second-hand messenger bag to her side. Snow flurried in soft spirals over the parking lot, melting on contact with her hood. She exhaled slowly, watching her breath fog before her. Her first day. The Bitterroot County shelter was smaller than she'd imagined. Just a squat building on the edge of town, wrapped in chain-link fences and half buried in snowdrift. No banners, no playful dog murals, just cement, cold steel, and a faded sign that read Adoption Center, Est 1989. Luna was 23, fresh out of her 3rd semester in the animal behavior program at the state university. She wasn't sure what she was expecting, maybe wagging tails, big grins, a few barks of welcome. But the moment she opened the shelter door, she was hit with the smell of bleach and longing. Inside, the world was louder. Dogs barked from every direction, each one trying to speak louder than the last. Some leapt against their kennels, paws scratching against the wire. Others whimpered or howled. The fluorescent lights buzzed softly above it all, uncaring. A woman in her 40s with tired eyes and a clipboard greeted her. "You must be Luna?" "Yeah," she nodded, brushing snow from her sleeves. "First day." "I'm Maggie, manager here. I'll walk you through. It's a little chaotic this week. We had a new drop-off run. 12 dogs in 3 days." They walked the hallway together. The kennels lined both walls, some with colorful name cards taped to the bars, others scribbled with urgent notes, "Do not pair, skittish, on hold for evil." The noise was constant, as if every animal were calling out to be seen, heard, chosen. But not all of them. At the far end of the hall, the noise fell away. Kennel 28B sat half in shadow, next to an emergency exit. No frills, no colorful name tag, just a plain clipboard that read, Coda, male, Eston 8YO, GSD, intake 6 years. Luna stopped. "Who's that one?" Maggie turned. Her voice softened. "That's Coda. Been here the longest." Luna stepped closer to the bars. Coda was sitting perfectly still, posture upright, back straight. His coat was thick, though a little dull with age, and his muzzle bore threads of white like dust on midnight fur. He didn't bark, didn't flinch, didn't move. He just watched her. Not like the others, not with desperation or excitement or even fear. His gaze was deeper than that. Calmer. Measured. He wasn't looking at her. He was looking through her. Something tightened in her chest. "He doesn't do the whole 'please love me' routine?" she asked quietly. "Nope. Never has." Maggie sighed. "Doesn't jump, doesn't whine, doesn't act up. Lets kids pet him. Never caused a scene. Has no one ever tried to adopt him?" A few glances here and there. Some families said he was too serious. One guy said Coda made him feel like he was being evaluated. She smiled at the memory. He wasn't wrong. Luna crouched slowly, meeting Coda at eye level. Still, the shepherd didn't move, just blinked. And yet, there was something unspeakably present in him, like standing next to an old tree that had survived fire, snow, and time and still refused to fall. They stared at each other for a long moment. The rest of the shelter noise faded into static. "Do you think he remembers someone?" Luna asked softly. Maggie hesitated. "I think he's waiting for someone. Might have been a working dog before. Police, maybe. Came in after some local fire. No collar, no chip. We filed reports. Nothing came back." Luna finally stood. 6 years is a long time to wait." Maggie nodded. "And yet, he shows up at that gate every single morning. Same spot, same posture, like clockwork." That night, Luna couldn't stop thinking about him. She lay in her dorm room with the heater humming beside her bed, scrolling through her shelter orientation packet. She skimmed past vaccination charts, feeding schedules, behavior flags. Her eyes flicked down to a column titled Long-Term Residents, and there it was. Coda, estimated 2,190 days in care. She stared at the number. Her fingers hovered over the screen, then dropped. She reached for her phone. No filters, no angles, just one raw photo she'd taken when no one was looking. Coda sitting perfectly still in the shadow of his kennel gate, eyes fixed forward. She opened the social media app, typed without overthinking. If someone out there ever lost a hero, he might still be waiting for you. His name is Coda. He's waited 6 years in silence. Please, just share this." She hesitated, then hit post. There was no hashtag, no plea for likes. Just a tired girl's whisper into the void. She put her phone down, rolled over, and closed her eyes. Coda's stare stayed with her. Not pleading, not broken, just waiting. And somewhere in that quiet place, something had begun to move. The moon hung low over the dormitory parking lot, casting long silver shadows across the snow. From her third-floor window, Luna watched a lone street lamp flicker like a tired heartbeat. Inside her room was quiet books stacked on the desk, a half-finished mug of chamomile cooling beside her laptop, the shelter's intake forms still splayed open like paper scars. But her mind wasn't on school. It hadn't been since she left the shelter. It was still with him. Coda. That name didn't fit the weight of what she saw in his eyes. He wasn't just a rescue dog, not just another kennel number. There was something else there, something older, something aching but proud, something that had outlasted the noise. She rolled over on her narrow bed, but sleep refused her. Her thoughts kept circling back to that moment, kneeling in front of his kennel, watching as he watched her. He didn't ask for anything, didn't even blink like most dogs would. He just held her gaze like he was trying to remember a name he'd once known. Or maybe He was hoping she'd remember his. That was what haunted her most. Not his stillness, not the graying fur, not the years carved into his file, but the idea that he hadn't given up. That after 6 years, after watching hundreds of dogs get adopted, after hearing every bark and cry pass him by like wind through wire, he was still waiting. Luna sat up, reached for her phone, and opened her camera roll. There he was. The photo she had taken earlier. No filters, no edits. Just Coda, sitting upright in the far right kennel, face half-shadowed, eyes lit by a shaft of winter sun. Silent, dignified, forgotten. She hesitated. What was she even hoping for? She had maybe 200 followers, mostly classmates and cousins. She wasn't an influencer. She didn't have a platform. And still, she felt the words coming before she could stop them. She opened her notes app and typed, letting her instincts speak. This is Coda. He's been in the shelter for 6 years. He doesn't bark. He doesn't beg. He just waits. Every single morning he sits by the gate like he still believes someone's coming. No chip, no collar, no backstory. Just a good dog, waiting. If someone out there ever lost a hero, he might still be waiting for you. She read it back once. Then again. Her throat felt tight, like the words belonged more to Coda than to her. She copied the text, opened Instagram, and pasted it beneath the photo. She didn't tag the shelter. She didn't add hashtags. She didn't ask for donations. She didn't even put her name. She just pressed share. Then locked the phone and turned it face down on the pillow. For a while, there was only silence, the kind of silence that creeps in when the world is snow-covered and hushed, when even your own thoughts feel like they're tiptoeing around something sacred. She thought she might fall asleep, but her phone buzzed, once, then again. She turned it over. A message from her roommate. Is this the dog from your shelter? I just saw him on my feed. Someone reshared it already. Luna blinked. Opened Instagram. 5 likes. 9 shares. 20. She sat up. Refreshed the screen. 37 shares. She frowned. By the time she opened the full stats, her post had been reshared over 100 times in under 10 minutes. It wasn't the numbers that shook her. It was the comments. That stare broke me. Who do I call to adopt him? This looks like the dog my grandfather lost years ago. I don't know why I'm crying. Just, someone get this dog home. It kept going. Within an hour, the post had passed 1,000 shares, and Coda, once the silent figure in a forgotten corner of the shelter, was now being seen by people across counties, across states. People who had never met him but were already feeling what Luna had felt in that first instant. That ache, that weight, that strange, unspeakable hope. Somewhere in that swell of digital whispers, something had shifted. Coda hadn't changed. He was still in his kennel, still quiet, still watching. But now, the world was finally watching back. At 2:13 a.m., Luna stood barefoot by the window staring out at the snow-covered parking lot. The world hadn't gone quiet again. It had gone still, like the breath before a miracle. She picked up her phone one more time. The post had hit over 3,000 shares, and one message sat unopened in her inbox from someone named Nathan S. The subject line read, "I think that's my dog." The morning was quiet, the kind of stillness that settles after snowfall. Pale sunlight filtered through the blinds of a modest one-story home tucked in the outskirts of Bozeman, Montana. Inside, the kettle hissed faintly on the stove while a single mug sat half-filled with black coffee on the worn kitchen counter. Nate Sullivan stood barefoot on the tile floor, one hand cradling the cup, the other mindlessly scrolling through his phone. The rhythm of his mornings rarely changed. Coffee, headlines, silence. He preferred it that way. After the fire, after the rehab, after the long unraveling of who he used to be, stillness had become a kind of survival. The house was sparsely furnished. A dark green couch in the living room, a scarred oak coffee table, a few framed photos on the wall, family shots. Most of them faded. No sound except for the gentle hum of the fridge and the faint creak of wood when the heater kicked on. Nate leaned against the counter, thumb swiping. News, weather, a video of a dog riding a skateboard. More noise. Then something caught him. He paused mid-swipe. It was a photo. A dog sitting behind the bars of a kennel, half in shadow, half in sun. Upright, still, proud. There was no dramatic caption, just a few plain words that landed like a stone in his chest. This is Coda. He's been in the shelter for 6 years. He doesn't bark. He doesn't beg. He just waits. The mug slipped from his hand and hit the counter's edge. Hot coffee sloshed over the side and splashed onto the floor. Nate didn't notice. He brought the phone closer, the image expanding across the screen. The dog's eyes locked with the camera, distant but steady. His ears, alert but relaxed. The angle of his back, the patch of gray beneath his muzzle, that scar on the left paw. God, that scar. His throat went dry. He knew that dog. He knew him. But that couldn't be possible, could it? His heart thudded once, hard, and in that instant a flicker of heat bloomed behind his eyes, not from the room but from somewhere deeper, older, from memory. Flashback, 7 years earlier. The cabin was burning. Smoke curled under the roof beams like black fingers clawing for escape. The world outside was orange and choked. Sparks snapped through shattered windows. The air screamed in wood and flame. And through it all, through the roar and crash and smoke, there was barking, sharp, panicked, unrelenting. "Coda! Get out! Go!" Nate had shouted, coughing through a throat of ash, eyes watering, voice raw. He remembered the dog's silhouette standing at the doorway of the living room, refusing to leave him behind. "Out!" he'd screamed again, and this time Coda had bolted through the open door into a flurry of embers. The last thing Nate saw before he passed out was his dog's tail disappearing into the whiteout of smoke. He gasped aloud, his grip tightening around the edge of the counter. His knees nearly gave out. That night had haunted him in pieces for years, broken shards of fire and fear, and the sound of paws on burning floorboards. He'd been pulled out unconscious by firefighters, flown to a hospital in Spokane, and kept in a medically induced coma for weeks. When he woke, he'd asked for Coda, but no one had an answer. The cabin was gone. The shelter that picked up strays from the fire zone had shut down later that year due to budget cuts. Records vanished. Leads died in disconnected phone lines and filing errors. Eventually, everyone told him the same thing. If your dog made it out, someone probably adopted him. But Nate had known better. Coda wouldn't have left him, not by choice. And for years the guilt gnawed at him in silence. Now, staring at this photo, the tilt of that head, the quiet steadiness in those eyes, he felt the breath leave his lungs. "It's you," he whispered, the words catching. His phone buzzed in his hand. Another message popped up from a friend. "Dude, this viral dog looks like your old K9. Wild, right?" But Nate wasn't reading anymore. He was already opening the message thread. His fingers trembled as he typed. "Hi, I'm not sure how to say this. I think this is my dog. His name was Coda. He went missing 6 years ago during a fire. I've looked for him everywhere. I have photos. Please, please tell me this is real." He attached 3 pictures, one of Coda in the snow, tongue lolling, one of Coda curled on an old plaid rug, eyes half closed, and one, his favorite, of Coda, sitting by his side in full uniform, both of them in police K9 service gear, with the Bitterroot County badge just visible over his shoulder. He hit send. Then, slowly, he sank into the chair at the kitchen table. He didn't know what he'd find. But in his gut, in that place no trauma could numb, he already knew. Somewhere out there, his dog had waited, and somehow was still waiting. The tires crunched over a thin layer of ice as Nate pulled into his sister's driveway, headlights casting long shadows over the garage door. He parked without turning off the engine, letting the warmth of the vents wash over shaking fingers. The phone sat in the cup holder, screen still open to the photo of the dog Coda, but older. Changed. But undeniably him. It had been less than an hour since he'd sent the message. No reply yet, just silence. He needed to talk to someone. Someone who remembered before. He stepped out of the car, boots hitting frozen pavement, and walked up the steps with a stiffness that hadn't always been there. The fire hadn't just burned down a cabin. It had stolen pieces of him he hadn't known were fragile. Memory, rhythm. Whole months vanished like smoke. The porch light clicked on as he knocked. A moment later the door creaked open and his sister appeared. Emma, flannel shirt over leggings, her hair pulled into a messy bun. She took one look at his face and stepped aside. "You okay?" she asked. He didn't answer right away, just moved past her into the warm living room that smelled faintly of cinnamon and old pine. A fire crackled softly in the hearth. On the wall above the mantel hung a framed photo one he had taken long ago of a snow-covered forest, untouched and still. He stood there for a long second. "I think I found him," he said, voice barely above a whisper. Emma turned. "Found who?" He held up his phone, thumb trembling as he opened the photo again and turned it toward her. Her brow furrowed. "Is that?" "Coda," he said. "It's him." She reached out, took the phone carefully from his hand, and stared. Where was this? A shelter, somewhere near Bitterroot County. I think he's been there this whole time." Emma sat slowly on the couch, eyes never leaving the image. 6 years. Nate nodded, sitting down beside her. His shoulders slumped forward, and suddenly he felt all of it pressing down on him. The years of not knowing, the nights spent asking questions to no one, the dreams of smoke and barking that never quite faded. All of it converging in this one impossible photo. "He waited," he whispered. "Through all of it." Emma looked at him gently. "You really think it's him?" He didn't hesitate. "I know it is. The eyes, the scar on his paw, the way he sits. He always sat like that. He's older now, yeah, but it's him." A pause hung between them, heavy and sacred. "You never told me what happened that night," she said. Nate stared into the fireplace. Not much to tell. Tell me anyway. So he did. He told her about the forest fire that had torn through the valley like a beast, hungry and blind. About how he and Coda had been caught while returning from a supply drop to a ranger station. About the smoke, the explosion, the panic. How he'd told Coda to run. "And then?" she asked. "I woke up in a hospital bed, bandaged, on oxygen. They told me I was found unconscious, alone, that I'd inhaled enough smoke to kill me twice over." His voice cracked. "I asked about Coda. Every day. No one had an answer. No one even knew where he'd gone. The ranger station had been wiped. The closest shelter shut down before I was discharged. The records were never transferred," Emma finished softly. He nodded. "I told myself someone adopted him. Some kind family took him in. But deep down, I didn't believe it. I knew he would have waited. That dog never gave up on anything." A long silence followed, filled only by the soft pop of the firewood and the hum of time. Emma finally asked, "What are you going to do?" He stood. There was a resolve now in his frame, thin but rising, like something long dormant had begun to stir. "I'm calling them." He sat at the kitchen table, fingers tapping against the wood as the phone rang in his ear. One ring, two, then a click, followed by a woman's voice. "Bitterroot County Shelter. This is Maggie." Nate opened his mouth, but nothing came out at first. He swallowed. "Hi, my name is Nate Sullivan. He stopped, exhaled. "I saw a post online about a dog named Coda, German Shepherd. I think he's mine." The line went quiet for a moment. Then Maggie's voice, careful. "Can you tell me more?" He nodded, even though she couldn't see him. "We were partners. In the K-9 unit. He went missing during a wildfire 6 years ago. I've been looking ever since. I have photos, videos, proof. Could you send them to our email?" "Already have them ready." She gave the address. He sent everything. Waited. There was something so surreal about sitting in a small kitchen at nearly midnight, watching attachments upload, knowing that a part of his heart lost for 6 years might be a click away. Maggie's reply came 5 minutes later. "Got them. I'm going to look at these with someone else and get back to you soon. But from the few I've seen, it looks really promising." Nate sat back, eyes burning. Promising. He stared at the last photo he'd attached him and Coda side by side in uniform. The dog looked proud, alive, full of purpose. Now, 6 years later, he was still waiting in a kennel with no name on the door. But maybe not for much longer. Snow gusted against the shelter's office window, rattling the pane like knuckles on a door. Inside, the fluorescent lights cast a thin hush over filing cabinets and stacks of adoption forms. It was past closing time, but Maggie hadn't left. Neither had Luna. The printer chattered, spitting out a series of glossy, full-color photos that had arrived by email less than an hour ago. Maggie plucked them from the tray one by one, laying them across the cluttered desk beneath a dusty desk lamp. Luna hovered near the door, heart thumping as if she were the dog waiting in kennel 28B and not a volunteer clutching a cup of lukewarm cocoa. "Okay," Maggie breathed, pushing her glasses higher on the bridge of her nose. "Let's see." The first photo showed a younger German shepherd bounding through snow, tongue lolling, eyes bright. The second captured the same dog curled on a plaid rug in front of a stone fireplace, head cocked toward the camera. The third Maggie paused was a formal shot, Canine harness, police badge glinting, and a man kneeling beside the dog, broad-shouldered and smiling. Nate Sullivan, Luna thought. Maggie slid the last picture closer to the lamp. "Look at those ears," she whispered, tracing the outline of each triangular tip. Even in the dim office light they carried a certain regal symmetry, one ear just a hair higher than the other. Luna had seen that silhouette every day since she started volunteering. "Same right ear tilt," Maggie murmured. She reached for a printed intake photo of Coda taken only a week earlier during routine shots. Placing them side by side, she leaned in. "Same blaze on the muzzle. And—" she lifted the dog's formal portrait. "That scar, left forepaw." Luna felt a shiver. During cleaning rounds, she'd noticed the faint white line that dashed across Coda's paw pad, like a lightning strike frozen in flesh. They'd thought it was an old cut from his stray days. Now it was a breadcrumb through time. Maggie swiveled in her chair and opened a drawer, fishing out a handheld flashlight. "Come on," she said, voice suddenly hushed with urgency. "I need to see him." The hallway lights were dimmed for the night, but kennels still rustled with the restless sighs of dogs settling onto blankets. Their paws padded and tails thumped as Maggie and Luna moved past, flashlight beam dancing over concrete. At 28B, Coda was awake, lying sphinx-like on his bedding, head lifted. The moment the two women appeared, he didn't bark or stand. He simply watched. The steadiness of his gaze felt heavier tonight, as if the air had thickened with possibility. "Hey, gentlemen," Maggie said softly, kneeling. She slipped a hand through the bars and let him sniff her fingers. Then very gently, she lifted his left paw. Coda allowed the touch without flinching. The flashlight revealed the scar in stark relief, thin, pale, unmistakable. Luna held up Nate's printed photo across the bars, aligning scar to scar, ear to ear. The match felt uncanny, almost theatrical, but nothing about this moment was performance. It was gravity, two halves of a story swinging toward each other on an invisible arc. Maggie exhaled, a sound somewhere between a laugh and a sob. Her lips trembled as she leaned closer to the bars. "It's him," she whispered. The words settled over the kennel like snowfall, soft, unstoppable. Luna pressed a hand to her chest. A dozen emotions collided inside her. Relief, awe, disbelief. 6 years of waiting were condensing into seconds. Coda tilted his head, sensing the shift-2 heartbeats quickening on the other side of steel. His tail tapped once against the blanket. Not a wag of excitement, more a quiet acknowledgement. "I'm listening." Maggie stood, wiping at her eyes. "We need to prepare," she said, voice suddenly business firm despite the shimmer. "Paperwork, vet clearance, behavioral release. If Nate's coming, everything has to be perfect." "He's coming," Luna answered before she could stop herself. "He has to. You felt that picture? He already belongs to him." Maggie offered a knowing smile. "Destiny in a JPEG. Who knew?" They started back toward the office, but Luna lingered. She crouched beside the kennel again, fingers curling around the cool metal. Coda inched closer until his nose brushed her knuckles. "I told you someone would see you," she whispered. Her eyes stung. "I just didn't know it would be the one you never stopped seeing." Coda's gaze held hers, steady, amber, endless. In it, Luna sensed not just relief, but readiness, as if the old shepherd had carried the weight of 6 lonely winters for a reason he couldn't name until now. "Tomorrow," she promised. "Tomorrow everything changes." She rose and followed Maggie down the corridor. Behind her, Coda lay back on his blanket, paws neatly crossed, head high still the gentleman. But tonight there was a new cadence in his stillness. not the rhythm of waiting, the rhythm of expecting. Somewhere miles away, a man who had nearly lost hope was packing photographs and memories into a worn duffel bag, preparing for a drive that would stitch time back together. And in the hush of Bitterroot County shelter, destiny stood one closed kennel door away. The shelter parking lot was still glazed with dawn frost when Nate's truck rolled to a stop. The engine idled a moment, releasing a thin plume of breath into air so cold it tasted metallic. Nate gripped the steering wheel, knuckles white, as he stared at the low-slung building that had become the axis of his sleepless night. He could see the orange glow of lobby lights through the frosted glass doors. Silhouettes moved inside shadows of people who already knew why he had come. With a trembling exhale, he killed the engine. The sudden hush was so absolute it rang in his ears. It's him. Maggie's late-night email echoed in his head like a heartbeat, confirming the scar, the ears, the posture. "We think this is your coda." Nate opened the door, boots crunching on grit and ice. The air sharpened every sense, prickling along scars that still mapped his ribs. He slung a weathered duffel over his shoulder inside, a folded K9 harness, a frayed tug toy, and the photo he'd kept on his bedside table through 6 grief-heavy years. Proof of the life they'd shared, and maybe the life they could still salvage. 2 steps, then 3. With each one, memories spilled in fragments. Crackling radios, cedar smoke nights on patrol, the rhythmic jangle of Coda's collar as they jogged wooded trails. He'd bottled all of it for survival. Now the glass seemed to splinter with every heartbeat. The lobby door swung inward before he could reach it. Luna stood framed against the light, winter coat unzipped, eyes bright and nervous. "Mr. Sullivan?" she asked, voice soft but steady. "Nate," he corrected automatically. "I'm Luna." She tried to smile, but it faltered under the gravity between them. "They're waiting for you." She stepped aside. Nate crossed the threshold and felt the warmth of the building collide with the chill in his chest. The scent of disinfectant hit first, layered with faint wet fur and kibble. Familiar, yet magnified by anticipation. Behind the reception counter, Maggie waited, clipboard clutched to her chest. Around her, staff members lingered in doorways and behind interior windows, pretending to tidy papers or sip coffee while their eyes tracked Nate's every move. It wasn't voyeuristic curiosity, it was collective hope, held fragile in gloved hands. "Morning," Maggie managed. Nate swallowed. "Morning." No one spoke of paperwork or ID checks. Those formalities had been handled before sunrise. Instead, Maggie simply turned and led him toward the kennel hall. The corridor lights were dimmed low to keep the dogs calm, casting long shadows that quivered with each flicker of fluorescent hum. As they entered, the usual chorus of barks surged, then faltered, as if the dogs sensed something extraordinary in the air. Luna followed a pace behind, palms pressed to her messenger bag. Staff members slipped into observation nooks, small glass windows cut into the walls between offices, and kennel runs. Silent witnesses to a chapter about to close or begin. Halfway down the corridor, the noise tapered into an odd hush. Dogs tilted their heads, tongues stilled mid-pant, tails lowered into curious wagless lines. It was as though every sound were being pulled into the gravity of one kennel. Kennel 28B. Nate's boots slowed. There, in the last stall before the emergency exit, lay the dog from his dreams and nightmares. Coda rested in a sphinx-like pose on a gray blanket, paws crossed neatly, muzzle lifted. His eyes found Nate, The instant the man stepped into view, he didn't rise, didn't whine. A silence heavier than any bark flooded the hallway. Nate could feel hearts beating that weren't his own, the staff watching through glass, Luna holding breath behind him, even the restless shifting of other dogs fading into complete stillness. But the only thing that mattered now was the tether of amber gaze locked on his. He took one step forward. Coda's ears twitched. Another step. At 5 feet away, Nate's vision blurred. The world shrank until it was nothing but iron bars, and those eyes, older now, rimmed in silver but inconceivably familiar. A tremor rippled through Coda's shoulders. Not fear. Recognition trying to break through bone and memory. Nate knelt, knees connecting with concrete. He drew a breath so unsteady it shuddered through the cage wires. "Coda," he whispered. The name slid into the stillness like a key, turning in an ancient lock. Coda's head tipped to one side, the same idiosyncratic tilt Nate had spent years teasingly calling the question mark look. A soft whine vibrated in his chest, low and tentative, as if testing whether the sound would shatter the fragile reality holding them. Nate lifted a hand, palm open through the bars. His scarred fingers hovered inches from Coda's whiskers. Time slowed to an aching crawl. Would the dog remember the scent of smoke on that skin? The salt of nights spent tracking fugitives through pine woods? The quiet pats that followed every good boy? Job well done? Coda leaned forward. His nose touched Nate's palm, snuffling once, twice. Then he closed his eyes. A sigh rolled through his entire body, long and trembling, the sound of something unclenching after years of silent endurance. From the observation window, a staff member bit back a sob. Luna pressed her hand to her mouth. Maggie's clipboard slipped to her side, forgotten. The hallway was silent, but for 2 synced breaths, man and dog, relearning the rhythm they once shared. Nate lowered his forehead to the bars, voice cracking open. "I'm so sorry," he murmured. "I tried. I didn't know where to look. Words unraveled. The apology collapsed into a broken exhale. Coda's tail thumped once against the blanket. A gentle, forgiving heartbeat. For the first time in 6 years, Nate believed redemption might be something you could reach through steel. Behind them, the shelter seemed to exhale 2 lights buzzing brighter, dogs stirring into gentle wags as though granted permission to breathe again. The weight that had hung in 28 B6 winters of solitude shifted onto the shoulders of everyone watching. But it no longer felt like sorrow. It felt like awe. Maggie finally stepped forward, voice husky. "If you're ready," she said, "we can open the gate." Nate nodded, eyes never leaving Coda. "Then let's bring him home." Steel groaned as Maggie slid the kennel latch back. The clink sounded louder than it should have, like a church bell tolling in a stone-quiet valley. Nate stayed on his knees, every muscle braced between terror and hope, fingers still curled around the cool wire. The gate eased open a hand's breadth. "Coda," he breathed, voice shredded and raw with years of unsaid prayers. For a heartbeat, nothing moved. The hallway lights hummed. Dust motes drifted through the sliver of dawn spilling from a high window. Even the other dogs seemed to hold their lungs, as if the whole shelter understood that silence was sacred in this instant. Then Coda's ears flicked forward. A tremor passed from the base of his neck down his spine, subtle as wind shivering a flag. He didn't leap, didn't bark. He only froze like an ancient statue given breath but unsure how to use it. His eyes widened, the amber deepening into something wet, and impossibly young. "Coda," Nate whispered again, softer now, coaxing the syllables like a secret only they shared. He extended his right hand, palm up, fingers open, every scar visible beneath harsh fluorescent light. It was the same gesture he'd used 1,000 times on patrol when he'd needed Coda to focus, to center, to come home. Coda inhaled sharply. Nate could hear it, and rose, joints unfolding with deliberate care. The silvered hair along his shoulders caught the light like frost on timber. His tail lifted half an inch, twitching once, twice, as if tethered to a memory that wasn't ready to break free. One step. The blanket rustled under his paw pads. Another step. The gate stood ajar now, just enough for a nose or a lifetime to pass through. Nate's hand trembled. He steadied it against his knee, tears blurring the edges of his vision. He wanted to speak again, to soothe, to beg forgiveness, but the words snagged against the lump in his throat. Coda closed the last bit of distance. His nose touched Nate's fingertips, warm and damp. He paused there, drawing in the scent the way a traveler inhales a long-forgotten coastline. Then, with exquisite slowness, he pressed the crown of his head into Nate's palm. Contact. The weight of that single gesture made Nate's chest cave forward. His other hand rose instinctively, threading through the thick fur behind Coda's ears. The texture was different, coarser with age, but unmistakably his partner's coat. A sound escaped Coda's throat, a tiny, fragile whimper that cracked open the air. It was followed by a breath so deep Nate felt it vibrate through his own sternum, a sigh heavy with 6 winters of waiting, of unanswered questions, of nights listening for a footstep that never came. Nate bowed his head until his forehead rested against the shepherd's, fingers splaying to cradle the familiar skull. Hot tears slid down the bridge of his nose, disappearing into black and tan fur. "I'm here," he managed, voice quaking. "I'm here, buddy. I'm so damn sorry." Coda's tail beat the concrete once, twice, then swished steadily, gathering momentum the way a pendulum finds its rhythm after years at rest. His body leaned into Nate's kneel, a silent permission granted. Old muscles trembled, releasing tension long held like a violin string tuned too tight. Behind them, Luna felt her own tears break loose, blurring the scene into impressionistic light man and dog fused at the center of a glowing hallway. Maggie pressed a fist to her mouth, face flushed and shining. Staff members in observation windows wiped eyes with sleeve hems and forgot the coffee cooling in their hands. Nate slid both arms around Coda's neck. The shepherd allowed the embrace, then answered it, pushing closer until Nate nearly lost balance and sat fully on the floor, legs folding awkwardly. He didn't care. The concrete was cold and unforgiving, but Coda's heartbeat against his ribs was the warmest thing he'd felt in 6 lost years. He felt the dog breathe again. Another deep exhale, then a gentle hum, almost a growl, but softer, content. Nate remembered that sound. Coda's all-clear rumble after a successful search. Confirmation that the world, for one more moment, was safe. Nate's palm found the scar on Coda's left paw. He traced it lightly, and Coda shifted, licking Nate's cheek, a swift, decisive touch that tasted of kibble and kennel air, yet landed sweeter than any earthly medicine. "Good boy," Nate whispered, the phrase trembling out of him like an old song lyric rediscovered. Good boy." Coda's tail thumped harder. The quiver in his shoulders stilled. He looked up at Nate with eyes no longer wary but luminous, reflecting a flame that hadn't burned since the night of the fire, the flame of purpose. In that glance, Nate recognized something else, too. Coda had forgiven him before he'd even asked. Dogs did that. They stepped over the wreckage of human failure with quiet grace, then waited at the far side until you were brave enough to join them. Nate exhaled, a sound equal parts grief and gratitude. Beside them, the hallway lights flickered as if acknowledging the moment, and the air warmed around shared breath. Time resumed its slow, soft footsteps behind him, a camera shutter click he barely heard, hushed voices promising paperwork and fresh blankets. But none of it pierced the small universe he and Coda occupied. For here, in the measured thud of a tale and the trembling hush of a man's apology, 6 years collapsed into the space of a single heartbeat. And somewhere deep in Coda's chest, a clock that had been paused at the hour of smoke and flame began ticking again, steady, certain, unstoppable. The office printer spat a final sheet into the tray, the whir of gears barely audible over the rustling excitement in the lobby. Maggie signed the bottom line with a flourish and handed the clipboard to Nate. "That's the last signature," she said, eyes shining. "As of now, he's officially yours again." Nate gripped the pen as though it were an anchor. The words, "Owner, Nathaniel Sullivan," glowed on the adoption form, stark and unbelievable. He traced them once with his thumb, half afraid the ink might smear and the moment dissolve. But the letters stayed bold, permanent, etched like a scar that had finally healed in the correct shape. Behind him, Coda stood at polite heel, harness freshly fitted. The old K9 webbing sagged a little where his chest had broadened with age, but it suited him, like a veteran finally wearing dress blues again. Every few seconds his tail brushed Nate's calf, gentle taps that felt like Morse code for, "We're good. I'm here." Word had spread through the shelter faster than any social post. Kennel techs, volunteers, even the janitor on the night shift crowded the lobby's edges. They didn't form lines. They formed aisles, instinctively creating a path from the front desk to the double glass doors that opened on the parking lot and the world beyond. Maggie cleared her throat. "Everyone ready?" she called, but her voice broke halfway through ready. A soft chorus of "yeah" and "mm-hmm" answered. No one wanted to shatter the hush with applause. This wasn't a pep rally. It felt closer to a send-off for a soldier finally heading home. Luna stepped forward first. She knelt, pressing a kiss between Coda's eyes. "Go show them," she whispered. "Show them what waiting can become." Coda licked a stray tear from her cheek, then looked to Nate for the next cue. Nate drew a breath that expanded every rib, every memory, and gave a quiet command he hadn't used in years. "Let's roll, partner." The pair took the first step. The hush bent around them like tall grass in wind. Some staff had clasped their hands, others covered their mouths. One volunteer who had bottle-fed newborn kittens last spring wiped tears on her sleeve, whispering, "He made it. He actually made it." As Nate and Coda moved down the aisle, kennel doors on either side seemed to perk. Dogs lifted noses, tails stirred. A brindle mutt tilted its head. A nervous beagle mix stopped pacing. Even Benny, the shy pit mix, pressed his paws to his gate lattice, watching intently. It was as if Coda carried an invisible torch, illuminating possibilities in each waiting gaze. Near the end of the hallway, Maggie stood beside a corkboard crammed with Polaroids of adopted pets and their new families. She held something small in her hand. When Nate reached her, she opened her palm, a round brass tag, newly engraved, "Coda, found. To 190 days never forgotten." Nate swallowed hard. He clipped the tag to Coda's collar. It chimed once, bright and certain. "Thank you," he whispered to Maggie. She shook her head. "He's the one who thanked us by reminding us why we do this." Then she tucked a folded paper into Nate's pocket. "His full shelter file. Maybe someday you'll want it." Sunlight speared through the frosted door panes ahead. Nate felt Coda's pace quicken, not a pull, simply an eagerness he remembered from search and rescue drills. Nose forward, shoulders squared, eyes fixed on the bright unknown. At the threshold, Nate paused and glanced down. "Ready?" he asked. Coda didn't wag. Instead, he turned slowly, deliberately toward the hallway behind them, the corridor of concrete and steel that had contained every one of his 190 waiting days. The dogs still watched, the humans still held their breath. For a moment, nothing moved. Then Coda dipped his head almost a bow and let out a single low chuff, neither bark nor whine, but something that sounded astonishingly like gratitude. The spell broke. A ripple of exhalations swept the hall. Someone sniffled, someone else whispered, "Goodbye, gentlemen." Coda faced forward again, nudged Nate's leg. Together they crossed the threshold. The glass doors swung outward and winter sunlight poured over them, molten gold on fur flecked with gray, on a man's unshaven jaw damp with tears he no longer tried to hide. The air outside was sharp, alive, carrying none of the sterile hush of the kennels. It smelled of pine, exhaust, and open sky. Coda paused on the top step, eyes half closed as if savoring the light, the cold, the freedom. The brass tag gleamed, catching a flare of sun that shot like a spark into the lobby behind them. Nate lifted a hand in silent thanks to the crowd inside, then touched his fingers to his brow in a soft salute. Doors eased shut. The shelter faded behind reflective glass, leaving only their mirrored silhouettes, man and dog facing forward. "Home," Nate said, the word fragile yet unbelievably real. Coda's tail lifted in a sure, steady arc. He trotted beside Nate toward the truck, leaving a double trail of footprints in the thin crust of snow, one set broad and booted, the other paw-shaped, lighter, but every bit as deep. Inside the lobby, Luna pressed her hand to the glass, heart aching in the best possible way. Around her, staff began to move again, some to clean, some to feed, all with a new quiet urgency. Because the hallway Coda had left behind wasn't just emptier, it was charged. Who would be next? Who else might wait 2,000 days and be found? Outside, the truck door clicked shut. The engine turned over, and tires eased onto the road. The sun broke fully above the pines, trailing light across the windshield. Coda settled on the passenger seat, head low but eyes alert, watching landscape flow past like pages in a long-lost book. Nate reached over and laid a hand on the shepherd's ruff. "For every day we lost," he murmured, "we're going to make a better one." Coda exhaled. A breath not of release this time, but of beginnings, and laid his paw over Nate's wrist. The road curved west toward mountains dusted white and horizons wide enough to hold 6 winters and whatever seasons remained. And as the shelter shrank in the rear-view mirror, a single shaft of sunlight lingered on the brass tag, making "found" shine like a promise too bright to look at for long, yet impossible to forget. The pickup rolled to a stop before Nate's cedar-clad cabin in the Bridger foothills. 2 rooms, a tilting porch, but a solid roof and a wood stove that glowed like an ember at night. Coda vaulted from the passenger seat, paws sinking into powder. He paused, tasting the air pine, smoke, the hush of a half-frozen creek, then padded up the steps as if he'd never been away. Inside smelled of split fur and worn leather. Winter sun streaked across floorboards Nate had laid one lonely summer. Coda patrolled the perimeter, nose cataloging couch corners and dog-eared field manuals, glancing back at Nate after each sector clear, moving on. The sweep ended at a cedar chest under the window. Nate had stuffed it years ago with memories he couldn't face, a folded uniform, service ribbons, a cracked leash, and at the bottom, a frayed hook and loop patch, silver badge, single-word handler. Coda nosed past Nate, extracted the patch, and settled on the rug, chin resting over it like a relic. Guilt sliced through Nate. 6 years. He waited 6 years while I rebuilt cabinets and called it healing. He knelt beside the dog. I quit before you did. Coda nudged the cloth toward him, laid his head across Nate's thigh, a low rumble of forgiveness vibrating through scarred ribs. Nate's fingers drifted through the dog's salt and pepper ruff until sorrow loosened its grip. From his duffel he produced an old braided tug toy. Coda's ears pricked. Light returned to his eyes. "We'll start slow," Nate said, gripping the other end. A gentle tug, a tentative grin, and the room exhaled dust and years of silence. Snow battered the windows, but the stove pulsed warmth. Nate dozed beneath a quilt. At the foot of the bed, Coda kept sentinel. At 2:07 a.m., a nightmare yanked Nate upright. Smoke, radio static, code 3. Evacuate now. Coda eased forward, muzzle against Nate's ankle, tethering dream to present. "Ghosts," Nate muttered, stroking velvet ears. He drifted back to sleep with Coda's head atop his hand, both souls breathing in unison until dawn painted frost pink. Morning tasted of percolating coffee and thawing earth. Invisible scars still itched, but some had begun knitting closed in the space between midnight alarm and daylight calm. After breakfast, Nate packed water, a blanket, a first aid kit, the habits of an ex-SAR cop, and drove deeper into the forest. Coda rode shotgun, nose twitching when they passed a wildfire-blasted mile marker, metal still soot-stained after 6 winters. They parked where plows seldom reached. Silence, thick as wool, wrapped the trail as they climbed toward the place where everything had burned away. Charred beams jutted from snow like broken ribs, a lone chimney tilted skyward, a tombstone for a life. Coda stiffened at the perimeter, tail rigid. "It's okay," Nate whispered, unsure whether he was lying. They crossed the threshold. Ash still bled from the soil. Near the collapsed living room corner, Coda paused over warped boards. Nate brushed away powder, remembering the night he'd promised to sew that patch back on tomorrow. Smoke ghosts tightened his chest. In the ruins of the kitchen lay a melted enamel kettle, once sky blue, now blistered black. It clanged in Nate's shaking hand, releasing the scent of burned coffee and dog hair trapped in memory. Tears scalded his lashes. "I left you," he told the dog. Coda pressed against him, trembling not with fear, but recognition. He turned toward the chimney and barked a single sharp boom that sent winter birds spiraling up. Enough mourning. They widened their search circle. With each lap tension eased, ash tang giving way to clean pine and the peppery musk of Coda's coat. Ideas sparked. A memorial bench, an agility course for dogs nobody believed in, maybe a sanctuary born from scarred ground. Nate asked, "What if we made this ours again?" Coda's tail swept slow ascent. Snowflakes drifted as they hiked back to the truck. The chimney, once a gravestone, looked more like a milestone marking where loss ended and rebuilding could begin. Next visit, we bring blueprints, Nate vowed. Coda's ears flicked forward. The dash thumped with his tail. That evening, the cabin glowed amber. Nate cleaned soot from the kettle, set it on the stove, and listened to water warm the hiss of yesterday, forging into tomorrow. Coda sprawled on the rug, tug toy between his paws, the handler patch beside him. When the whistle finally rose, he didn't bark this time. He watched Nate pour 2 cups, 1 coffee, 1 cool water companions from opposite ends of the same fire. They sat on the porch, steam curling into twilight, snowflakes dissolving on old scars. Somewhere deep in the forest, wind rushed through blackened trunks, but here only the crackle of ice on branches and the soft hum of 2 steady heartbeats filled the dark. Nate's voice broke the quiet. "We'll need volunteers, lumber, fencing, and trust." Coda nudged his knee as if to say, "Start with this." Nate breathed out, letting the plan root. The second night passed easier. Just before 2:00 a.m., Nate stirred, but Coda was already at his side, a gentle weight that turned panic into a sigh. By dawn, quilts lay tangled, but spirits lighter. Nate dangled the tug toy. Coda accepted, jaw careful on rope fibers. Breakfast clattered into the dog's bowl, coffee hissed, and sunlight spilled across the boards Nate had laid to silence echoes now alive with paw beats. Mid-afternoon, papers littered the kitchen table, sketches of an agility field, a cedar beam welcome shed, and a plaque, "No dog will ever wait alone again." Nate penciled in supply lists while Coda dozed beneath the window. Guilt still whispered, but hope spoke louder, its language the rhythm of nails on wood and the soft thunk of a tail striking floorboards in sleep. Outside, snow fell, erasing old tracks, offering untouched canvas. Tomorrow they'd return with tape measures and stakes. In the present glow, man and dog shared a single certainty. Whatever rose from the ashes, they would build it together. The stove crackled, the kettle purred. Coda stretched and laid his head on Nate's boot. Nate reached down, thumb brushing silvered fur, and felt the quiet promise settle deep. Past faced, future invited, home at last. Sunlight knifed through bare branches as Nate returned to the ghost clearing a once charred Montana ridge where he and Luna dreamed of building Coda's field. Snow squeaked under his boots. A yellow tape measure, sketch pad, and thermos of coffee were his only companions. Coda padded off lead, nose testing the wind while Nate knelt beside a half-buried foundation stone, penciling a grid for an agility course and small memorial garden. Halfway through the first line, the shepherd froze. Ears speared forward, tail leveled, one forepaw suspended as though time itself had jammed. Nate's pencil gouged the paper. "Coda?" No response. Only that total electric stillness he'd seen years ago on deployment just before an IED sniff. Silence thickened. Then Nate heard it too. A distant, muffled thump-thump, followed by a thin sob that the wind tried to smother. Coda exploded into motion. Snow plumed behind him. Ash puffed in his wake. "Coda, heel!" Nate's command ricocheted off burnt trunks and died. Panic detonated flashes of the wildfire night when he'd lost the dog for 6 hopeless years. Yet Nate slung on his pack and sprinted. Branches whipped his arms. Paw prints, clean ovals, arrowed downhill. He skidded into a gully, lost footing, slammed ribs first against a fallen log, wheezed, forced himself up. The faint cry sounded again, definitely a child. Adrenaline drowned dread. Nate vaulted the log, following tracks that wove beneath blackened firs until the forest spat him into a narrow creekside hollow. There, beneath a wind-felled spruce, sat a girl no older than 5. Pink coat torn, boots soaked, cheeks wind-burned. Coda stood between her and the gale, ears pinned low, body rigid, a living wall of fur and resolve. Relief slammed Nate so hard his knees quivered. Training overrode terror. He crouched a few feet away, voice calm and even. "Hey, sweetheart. I'm Nate. That's Coda. He's here to help." The girl's glassy gaze flicked to the shepherd, tiny fingers unclenched, brushing the dog's ruff. He wagged once, slow and measured. Nate tapped his emergency beacon. GPS pinged into the gray sky. Unfolding a thermal blanket, he wrapped it round her, while Coda shifted just enough to grant access. Then resumed sentry beside Nate, eyes sweeping the trees as if daring the forest to try again. The girl shivered wordlessly. Nate tucked her closer. Ellie, he'd learned later missing since the previous evening's snowstorm. Sirens were still miles out, but in his head they were already cresting ridges. He pressed a hand to Coda's neck. The shepherd leaned into him, steady as bedrock. Moments earlier, Nate had been sketching foundations. Now purpose had erupted unannounced from the timberline proof that destiny rarely waits for blueprints. Nate whispered, "You found her, partner." Coda met his gaze. Amber, knowing. The wildfire night rewrote itself inside that look, no longer a scar of loss, but the starting point of rescue. Search and rescue crews burst through trees just as Nate topped the ridge with Ellie swaddled against his chest and Coda pacing at his heel. Medics knelt, unzipping trauma bags. Sheriff Arlen James, a gray-mustached, stalwart Nate knew from county briefings, arrived seconds later, removing his Stetson in stunned respect. "Hand her over, sir," a paramedic urged. Nate surrendered Ellie to skilled gloves and warming packs. Her mittens still clung to a tuft of Coda's fur until the shepherd sat beside the stretcher. Only then did her eyes flutter shut, trust finally allowed. Arlen scribbled in a field notebook, then looked up, voice rough. "We grid searched that slope since dawn. Your dog heard something our mics missed." He turned to the assembled responders. "Gentlemen, that dog saved her." The declaration rang like a church bell through the hush of falling snow. Camera shutters clicked for the incident report. Coda's silver muzzle, Nate's soot-streaked jacket, Ellie's blanket-wrapped formal caught in sterile flashes that somehow failed to steal the soul of the moment. As medics sledded the child toward a waiting ambulance, Nate knelt and buried his fingers in Coda's coat, breath vibrating with equal parts gratitude and exhaustion. The shepherd pressed solid weight into his palm, tail thumping twice. "Yes, she's safe. Now breathe." Flashing lights carved neon tunnels through the snowpack en route to the county hospital. Ellie's vitals stabilized. Her parents rocketed toward town. Reporters, summoned by scanner chatter, swarmed the ER lot the instant Nate stepped out, microphones blooming like frost flowers. "How did you find her? What's the dog's name? Is he trained SAR?" Coda bristled, sliding between Nate and the scrum. Sheriff Arlen parted the crowd with a glare. Inside, a nurse, eyes bright with tears, whispered, "My niece was on that search line. She says they'd given up hope until he barked." Nate could only nod, voice lost somewhere behind the throb in his throat. By dusk, the story detonated online. The dog who waited 6 years saves lost child. Former K9 reunited with handler, finds girl in Montana woods. "A miracle with pause," says Sheriff Hashtar Coda. The hero trended by sundown. Luna's phone lit with screenshot after screenshot. Nate watched the digital tide from a curtained cubicle while a medic tended his bruised ribs. Across sterile linoleum, Coda lay sphinx-like, every flick of Nate's heartbeat mirrored in the shepherd's ears. A social worker peeked in. Ellie was awake, asking for the doggy. Hospital policy balked, but nurses overrode it. Minutes later, Nate guided Coda to a pediatric bed where Ellie sat swaddled in blankets the color of sunsets. Her parents' faces, ravaged by fear, now melting to wonder, stepped aside as the girl pressed trembling fingers into Coda's fur. "Thank you," her mother mouthed, tears fresh. Nate felt the words strike like warmth against winter skin. He knelt, placing his hand atop Ellie's so they both felt the heartbeat thrumming beneath silver coat. Camera lights wanted in. Hospital security kept them out. Some stories breathe best without a microphone. 48 hours later, Nate and Luna stood before a county courthouse podium ringed by news vans. Coda sat center stage on a blanket sized for giants, Benny snoozing beside him. Luna summarized the dream of Second Watch, a sanctuary where dogs who'd waited longest would never wait alone again. Fundraising once a quiet trickle, now a deluge, thanks to a single rescue. Reporters peppered Nate with questions about tactics. He credited Coda's instinct and 6 years of suppressed training. One asked if the dog shelter might have misjudged him. Nate's answer, later clipped into viral sound bites, was simple. Coda wasn't broken, he was waiting for the right call. Donations surged. Construction bids arrived pro bono. Schools requested assemblies. Yet for Nate, the true measure lay in quieter moments. Ellie's first handmade thank you card stick figure dog with cape, and the caption, "Coda saved me." Sheriff Arlen's impromptu visit to the half-built field where he hammered nails beside volunteers. Maggie's email from Bitterroot Shelter, reporting record adoptions credited to the hero everyone forgot. Meanwhile, Coda, unimpressed by fame, resumed his steady patrol of life's edges, inspecting lumber deliveries, nudging shy foster pups into sunshine, curling on Nate's feet during late-night blueprint revisions. But sometimes, when night settled and the fire burned low, Nate caught the shepherd gazing toward the ridge where ash still stained snow. Perhaps the dog was replaying that decisive dash, perhaps simply listening for the next heartbeat in need. Weeks later, at an elementary auditorium packed with squirming second graders, Luna read aloud from her draft of The Dog Who Waited. Coda lay at her side. Benny flopped across a stage light. When the tale reached the creekside rescue, children leaned so far forward their desks clacked. One boy, quiet, often bullied, pressed a hand to his chest and whispered, "I want to be like Coda, brave even when no one's watching." That night, Nate added a note to the margins of his sketchpad. Agility field stays. Memorial garden expands. Include reading circle for kids. Blueprints could wait no longer. By spring equinox, Coda's field opened under ribbons of sunrise. The plaque at the chimney read, "No dog will ever wait alone again." Senior mutts poured through the gate. Kids read stories beneath spruce boughs. War veterans found solace brushing grayed fur. At sunset, Nate watched Coda trot the perimeter, his shadow braided with those of newly freed dogs. Pride and dread mingled. The shepherd's muzzle was nearly white now, but Nate refused to borrow tomorrow's grief. Tonight, purpose rippled in every wag. Late May's warm hush settled over the cabin porch. Lanterns flickered, meadowlarks trilled down in the swale. Nate spread a quilt. Coda circled twice, sighed, and lay beside him. Luna brought chamomile. Benny snored in straw. Stars emerged, sprinkled like frost on midnight blue. Nate whispered thanks into aging fur. Sometime after midnight, cold air brushed his cheek. The quilt beside him was empty. He found Coda stretched on his favorite rug, chest still beneath lantern glow. No struggle, just a quiet choosing. Nate's knees hit floorboards. Salt blurred lamplight. "I thought I rescued you," he wept into silver ruff, "but you rescued me." Moments later, Luna joined him. Benny rested his head on Nate's thigh, three spirits braided by love and loss until dawn edged the mountains. They buried Coda beneath the chimney plaque, marigolds from Ellie tucked round his paws, Maggie's melted red ball nestled at his chest, a veteran's flag patch folded beneath one ear. A smooth river stone became his marker. Coda, the dog who waited, the heart who led us home below, the mantra that now guided an entire movement. You are never too old, never too broken, never too forgotten. You are still someone's hero. Lanterns glowed along the fence line that evening as Nate sat beside the fresh mound, Benny leaning heavy against his side. Across 6 bright acres, dogs raced through grass. Children's voices fluttered like kites, and the plaque's promise pulsed warm in twilight. In the hush that followed, Nate lifted his eyes to a sky flowering with stars. One cluster glimmered slightly brighter, steady as a shepherd's gaze. He smiled through tears. "Lead on, partner," he whispered. And somewhere beyond the chimney, beyond the ridge, beyond the measure of blueprints and time, the rhythm Coda had started steady, patient, unstoppable, beat on in every heart that ever dared believe waiting could bloom into wonder. The phone's first ring cut the dawn hush of Nate's cabin. By the third, Coda had lifted his head. By the 6th, Luna's name flashed across the screen. "Good Morning America just ran the body cam clip, Coda, guiding you through the snow," she blurted. "Everybody wants an interview. My inbox is melting." Nate, still groggy, surveyed the chaos already colonizing his living room. Newspapers headlined, "Local Hero Dog Saves Lost Girl," a laptop pinging with media requests, the landline's voicemail full for the first time in years. Through it all, Coda sat by the window, calm as snowfall, amber eyes reflecting a world he felt no need to chase. "We need a plan," Nate muttered, and Luna was on her way before he hung up. By 9, she arrived with the kind of coffee that strips frost off pine needles, a whiteboard, and blueberry muffins. The kitchen table became mission control. Every call or email earned a new sticky note. Denver Post feature, CNN remote tonight. Children's book offers, therapy dog keynote, elementary school assembly. Requests multiplied faster than they could sort. Luna's media studies degree finally found its calling. Nate juggled sheriff briefings and updates on 5-year-old Ellie, recovered but still hospitalized. Coda drifted between hearth, window, and water bowl, metronome, steady eat, rest, watch. Sheriff Arlen phoned at mid-morning. "CNN's parking their truck at the shelter, 3 p.m. They want the reunion setting." Nate eyed the dog now, belly up beneath the stove's warmth. "We'll be there." Luna hesitated with the marker still poised. "You sure about sharing him like this? If a single family takes home a dog that's been waiting as long as he did, it's worth the circus." Coda huffed either agreement or a request for another belly rub, and Nate obliged. The day roared on. Zoom producers, radio hosts, local news dispatchers. Between calls, Ellie's mother texted a photo. Ellie smiling weakly, clutching a plush shepherd, and wrote, "Tell Coda, his friend says hi." The message quieted the room more effectively than any ringtone. Nate showed Coda the picture. The dog bumped the screen with his nose, then Nate's chin, tail thumping once. At dusk, when the last email had finally been triaged, the cabin finally hushed again. Coda slept by the fire, paws twitching in dream patrol. Luna, blazer traded for an old college sweatshirt, opened her laptop with conspiratorial excitement. "Before 1,000 networks tell us who Coda should be," she said, "let me show you who he could help." She turned the screen. A slide of Coda nose to nose with Ellie's plush dog under the banner "Second Watch," where waiting dogs stand guard for hope. Her idea was simple. Use Coda's story, a senior dog who waited 6 winters and still chose to save a child, to champion the forgotten dog still caged in shelters, school visits, therapy ward rounds, adopt-a-senior campaigns. Coda would be the bridge, not the brand. She'd even built a wellness plan, rest days, vet check-ins, a rotation of low-energy protégés to join future outings so the mission outlived its founding hero. Nate's first concern was the dog's age 9 this spring, but Luna countered, "Media tours ask him to perform. This asks him to be himself." Coda wandered over, dropped his chin on Luna's slipper, and sighed as if voting. Nate laughed for the first time all day. "All right, you handle logistics, I guard his health. We move at his pace, no faster." Luna saved the file. Second Watch Proposal V1. Coda's tail swept the floor, sealing the partnership like a paw print on parchment. 2 weeks later, their proof of concept unfolded inside Ellison Middle School's auditorium. 7th graders buzzed like a hive until the double doors opened, and Coda trotted down the aisle wearing a navy vest that read "Second Watch, Ambassador." The hush that followed was instant and electric. On stage, Nate recounted the wildfire, Coda's 6-year wait in the kennel, the snow rescue. Each slide projected behind him folded the audience deeper into stillness. Coda in a shelter cage, Coda curled around Ellie, Coda gazing across winter ridges as search teams approached. A freckled boy up front finally broke the quiet. "How did he know where the girl was?" Nate glanced at the shepherd lounging sphinx-like on a blanket. "He didn't," he answered. "He just never stopped believing someone still needed him." The truth landed with audible breath intakes. A teacher dabbed her eyes. A shy student typed a note on his phone. "Keep believing someone needs me." When the bell rang, no one rose until the principal dismissed them with, "Remember, Coda, patience becomes purpose." As students filed past the stage, they offered crumpled drawings, friendship bracelets, whispered thank yous. Coda accepted every gift with a gentle sniff. Backstage, Nate lifted the vest off the shepherd's shoulders. "How'd we do?" Luna's eyes shone. "They'll never forget him." Nate scratched Coda's neck. "Neither will I." That night, back at the cabin, they pored over new emails. 3 more schools, a veterans center, a shelter 12 counties away begging for a visit. Nate worried over travel miles. Luna bookmarked a pet-friendly lodge near each stop. Coda slept through the planning, content to let the humans arrange the road ahead. Outside, moonlight silvered the snow. Reporters still drafted headlines, but Second Watch now, more mission than idea, settled its roots in the quiet heart of 3 souls who understood that fame flickers, purpose glows. Nate rose to stoke the fire and looked at Coda, silver coat turned molten by lamplight. "Ready for another mission, buddy?" he whispered. The shepherd's tail tapped twice affirmation, oath, heartbeat. Beyond the dark ridge, a line of unseen shelters, classrooms, and hospital corridors awaited their turn beneath that steady tailbeat. And somewhere in those places, another dog, another child, another veteran already breathed a little easier, though they couldn't yet name the reason. Coda would name it for them, one quiet visit at a time, proving again that hope waits, patience pays, and heroism sometimes arrives on four paws, exactly when it's needed most. The county courthouse crouched over Main Street like a sandstone citadel, its columns frosted with dawn ice. Inside, fluorescent lights hummed while voices stayed hushed, because justice everyone knew could hear a pin drop. Marshals clipped radios to belts, attorneys arranged notes with nervous precision. All movement paused, though, when Coda trotted through the metal detector, nails clicking a calm four-beat on the marble. No hero patches today, just a plain blue lead and Nate's steady hand. Deputy Claire Jensen flanked them, voice low. Victim witness room is ahead. She's terrified. The small suite smelled of crayons and worry. Posters of cartoon mountains pretended to promise safety. They fooled no one. Ava, 9 years old, feet dangling from a plastic chair, clutched a rabbit whose felt ears had been loved to threads. The man on trial had once tucked her in. Now she had to face him. Coda halted 3 feet away and lowered to his belly, ears at half-mast, tail brushing the tile in an unhurried sweep. Ava's gaze flicked past Nate, past the deputy, and locked on the dog's quiet certainty. He crept forward the space of a soft breath, laid his chin across her shoe, and waited. Ava's fingers unclenched. They left the rabbit, hovered, then sank into the shepherd's coat. Her shoulders fell. A tremor of relief escaped her chest. No instructions, no coaxing, just a heartbeat steady enough to steady hers. Deputy Jensen turned to the wall, blinking fast. The counselor dabbed her eyes. Nate simply watched his partner perform another wordless miracle. Down the hall, the bailiff's "all rise" bled through oak doors. Ava startled. Coda's tail thumped once. She stood, one hand buried in thick fur, and they walked together toward the courtroom, her terror's tempo now dictated by the dog's deliberate calm. Judge Holloway allowed support animals, but even seasoned reporters stiffened when a child and a gray-muzzled shepherd strode down the aisle like knights entering chapel. Jurors leaned forward. The defendant blanched. Ava climbed the small riser, rabbit in her lap. Coda curled at her feet, an unspoken barricade between a wounded memory and the man who caused it. The oath quivered but held. Direct examination drew halting truths. Each time Ava's voice wavered, she glanced down, and Coda's eyes steadied her like still water. Cross-examination tried to rattle the room but could not breach the hush that radiated from the dog's breathing. When it was done, Judge Holloway thanked the child for bravery seldom asked of adults. In the corridor, Ava wrapped both arms around Coda's neck. Tears, half relief, half release. Whatever words she whispered sank into fur rather than air, exactly where they belonged. Deputy Jensen murmured to Nate, "Verdict's a formality now. You two changed everything." Reporters clustered at the far end of the hall. None dared cross the sanctuary Coda and Ava had drawn. Nate heard an echo of a boy's question from that middle school assembly. How did he know where she was? Coda never knew. He only believed someone would need him. Belief again had beaten the dark. Winter sunlight slanted off salted asphalt as Nate's truck rolled into the parking lot that once felt like an ending. The low roof, chain-link runs, and faint disinfectant odor remained, but inside something fundamental had shifted. Hope buzzed as loudly as the overhead lights. Coda jumped down, landing lightly in a patch of slush. Volunteers noticed but did not swarm. They parted respectfully, creating a natural lane to the kennel wing. Maggie, the shelter manager, emerged wiping hands on jeans. Her greeting was nothing more than a palm pressed to her heart. "Welcome home," she said, voice breaking. "Just visiting this time." At the far corner where Kennel 28B had stood, concrete walls now held a glass alcove lit like a museum exhibit. Photographs traced a life arc. Coda behind bars, Coda in search and rescue vest. Coda leading Nate through the forest with Ellie. Centered on black velvet lay the brass tag engraved weeks earlier. Coda found. 190 days, never forgotten. Above the glass, acid-etched words declared, "Coda, the dog who waited, a symbol of patience, courage, and every life still waiting to be chosen." Nate exhaled, feeling 6 winters of guilt and gratitude settle into a single, shareable story. Coda studied his own reflection, then turned away, not toward his past, but toward the current occupants opposite the display. Most dogs quieted once Coda's reconnaissance began. His gait, a silent patrol, was familiar to staff. He was listening for the heartbeat that echoed his own years of waiting. One kennel still rattled, third on the left. Benny, a stocky blue-gray pit mix with gentle amber eyes, paced uncertain circles. Twice adopted, twice returned. His clipboard note read gentle, but shut down. Visitors approached. He retreated. Silence, not barking, betrayed his loneliness. Coda stopped outside Benny's run and sat, deliberate, statuesque. The corridor hushed as if someone had drawn a velvet curtain. Benny paused mid-circle, gaze locking onto the stillness. He edged forward. Coda did not move. One more step. A soft whoof, half question, half confession. Coda leaned until his cheek touched the chain link, eyes closed. "I'm here." Safe spreads outward. Volunteers held breath. Maggie's grip tightened on a ring of keys. Luna, standing beside Nate, whispered, "I think he's chosen." Nate crouched near Coda, palm down. "Hey, Benny. Been waiting long?" Benny sniffed, then licked Nate's fingers. Tentative hope, tasting human skin. Maggie opened the gate. Benny froze. Open doors had fooled him before. Coda crossed the threshold first, bumped the pit's shoulder in invitation. An anxious tail quivered, then lifted half-mast. Benny stepped out. The entire hallway inhaled, exhaled, smiled. A young couple and their toddler waited at the front desk, unsure which dog would meet both safety and love. Nate approached with the duo, Coda matching Benny's uncertain pace like a metronome for courage. The father knelt, palm forward. Benny sniffed, then leaned in. The mother's eyes misted. The toddler reached, tiny hand landing on velvet fur. Benny didn't flinch. Papers signed, leash transferred, outside doors swung open to evening air, crisp with stardust potential. Before following his new family, Benny looked back. For a heartbeat his eyes locked with the shepherd's mentor to initiate weight-scarred soul to fresh chance. Coda's ears tipped forward, Benny's tail completed its circle. Then he stepped into the sedan, engine humming toward a life that had room for second beginnings. The lobby relit once the door shut, gentle applause, damp eyes. Maggie whispered, "He's our compass now." Half the kennel hall had emptied since Coda's story broke. People drove hours for dogs once invisible. Coda turned and padded back down the corridor. Each stall he passed hushed. Dogs sensed the vector change. "Your turn is on the way." his silence seemed to promise. He paused where Benny had lived, sniffed the freshly cleaned space, then resumed patrolling, already attuned to the next rhythm of patience that matched his own. Nate stood under the glass memorial, hand on the tag, feeling how far one shepherd's quiet certainty had rippled. A middle school auditorium learning that waiting isn't failure. A courtroom where a child found her voice. A shelter corridor converting vacancy into aviation. Luna joined him, saving new adoption stats to the second watch spreadsheet. 2 exits in one day, she murmured. He's setting a record. No, Nate corrected softly, eyes following Coda's slow, purposeful gait. He's setting the bar. The evening crew arrived. Metal bowls clanked, fresh blankets unfolded. The day's last light bled amber through kennel slats. Coda completed one more circuit, then paused at the lobby threshold, looking back not at his own display, but at rows of dogs still waiting. He barked once quiet, decisive, heads lifted, tails stirred, hope translated across species. He turned toward the van, toward Nate, toward Luna, toward the next school or courthouse or shelter that had written help in letters too small for anyone but a patient dog to read. Nate opened the side door. Coda leapt in, bones older but heart impossibly young, carrying with him the scent of crayons, the hush of mahogany courtrooms, the echo of kennels that no longer felt like endings. As the van rolled under violet dusk, Bitterroot Shelter's new vacancy lights glowed like runway markers. A volunteer posted a fresh photo to the website. Kennel 3B Senior Husky Mix waiting since 2019. Within 10 minutes, the phone rang. Across the highway, in a sedan smelling faintly of new leather and toddler crackers, Benny rested his head on a small lap, accepting tentative strokes as if he'd always known how. Up ahead, a roadside billboard caught the headlights. Adopt the wait is worth it. Somewhere between those two vehicles, under a sky pricked with early stars, an idea radiated outward like ripple rings across still water. Waiting is not wasted time. It is potential gathering strength. Believe, and someday someone or some dog will meet you halfway. Coda lay down in the van's cargo bay, chin between paws, gaze fixed on passing fields. Nate glanced in the rear-view mirror. Mission accomplished, partner? The shepherd's tail thumped twice affirmation, oath, heartbeat answer, echoing in every place. Patience still breathed. Snow rattled the kitchen window like restless fingernails, while Nate rummaged in the bottom desk drawer, a junkyard of half-used notepads, dead batteries, and receipts bleached to near white. Coda lay nearby, head on paws, following every rustle with amber curiosity. They had spent the morning answering thank-you letters from school children and shelter volunteers. Now Nate reached for a task he had dodged since reclaiming his life from ash. At the back of the drawer, buried beneath a dog-eared field manual, rested a manila envelope, its corners ragged and edges gray with soot. Tragedy, he remembered, is lighter in the hand than its memory in the heart. Coda padded over, sniffed the smoky paper, ears dipping as he recognized the scent that had remapped both their journeys. Nate stroked the shepherd's neck, carried the envelope to the table, and let pale afternoon light spill across brittle pages. Inside lay the county fire report, incident number, GPS coordinates, a thermal map of a burn scar shaped like a black sunburst. At the top, 781 Franklin Hill Road structure fire, total loss. Nate traced the address with a fingertip that no longer felt like his own. Under cause. The marshal had typed undetermined. Beneath that, a list of items recovered. Charred kettle, melted door handle, fragments of a dog bowl. No accelerant, no culprit, and thus no tidy villain to blame. But a final photograph floored him. The cabin aflame, orange tongues tearing at rafters, and in the foreground a German shepherd blurring into darkness, Coda lunging back inside. Nate had always told himself his partner was safe when the roof collapsed. The frozen image whispered otherwise. Guilt flared, then loosened as Coda nudged his elbow, eyes steady, asking without words, "Why reopen wounds when we can build something new?" Nate reread the address. The land, abandoned since the fire, now belonged to the county. In the window's reflection, he saw lumber stacked for agility ramps and fence posts marking what would become Second Watch's sanctuary. Yet the ruin itself remained untouched, an asterisk in a sentence demanding completion. Resolve crystallized. He would buy the property, not to resurrect the old cabin, but to transform Ground Zero into headquarters for every dog still waiting behind a gate. Loss would become legacy. He slid the report into his pack. Tomorrow he would file the papers. Coda's tail swept approval across the floorboards. "We'll finish this," Nate murmured. And in the room's hush the stove seemed to flare brighter, as if purpose fed the flames. The truck rolled to a stop under iron-gray clouds, tires crunching crusted snow. Months of snowfall had softened the burn scar, but char still bled through drifts like ink through paper. Foundation stones cracked, half-sunken outlined the porch where laughter once echoed. Coda leapt down, sniffing air laced with pine resin and ghost smoke. Without hesitation he trotted toward the tree line, weaving between blackened trunks toward the ruined storage shed Nate had assumed was vaporized. Inside the sagging timbers, flashlight beam found warped shelves and collapsed plastic bins. Amid the wreckage, a rubber ball glowed, dull, crimson-blistered but intact, the training toy Coda had loved since puppyhood. Nate cradled the misshapen sphere, throat-tight with memory. Dawn games across dew-wet grass. Promises to play after the next shift that fire had stolen. Coda nosed the ball, then pressed his muzzle to Nate's cheek. The circle of grief closed with a silent vow to turn ash into action. The county clerk's office smelled of toner and worn carpet, mundane, yet monumental. Purchase price, $1. Line item, Sanctuary and Canine Rehabilitation Center. Nate signed. Luna's signature flowed beneath. A notary's stamp landed like a gavel. Coda, sprawled on the waxed linoleum, watched dust spark in soup-thin sunlight, oblivious to legal language but attuned to every uptick in human heartbeat. They drove straight to the burn scar, deed fluttering in the dashboard vent. In the truck bed lay a cedar plank from a sign shop, its letters still hidden behind painter's tape. At the clearing, February air smelled of thaw and fresh purpose. Luna knelt, crumbling charcoal-rich soil in her gloves. "Ash feeds new life," she whispered. Cedar stakes, hammer, fluorescent survey line, the trio paced a rectangle larger than the cabin had been, leaving room for heated kennels that would never lock, a sensory garden of dog-safe herbs, a play yard where seniors could sunbathe without ticking clocks. Each hammer blow tolled like a bell, reclaiming silence with intent. By noon, they unrolled Luna's overnight blueprint. Agility ramps in the northeast corner, a low barn retrofitted with radiant floors, a meandering reflection trail for veterans, children, and anyone else who needed a patient dog to lead them back to themselves. Nate swallowed hard. "Second Watch Headquarters," he said, each word a pulse. Coda barked once authorization granted. He sat by the old chimney beside the still-masked sign. Nate peeled away tape to reveal Coda's Field, a place where waiting ends. Luna filmed for social media. "Day 1, she narrated, voice shaking with excitement. We're standing on soil that once burned. This spring it grows hope. Her phone captured Coda's profile, ears perked, sign glowing behind him like a mission statement etched in cedar. They scattered grass seed hardy enough to root in ash, drove more stakes, sipped scalding coffee from a thermos. At intervals, Coda checked the perimeter, a foreman supervising rookies. Once he vanished. When he returned, muzzle dusted with snow, he laid a twig at Nate's boots, an offering, a baton passing from forest to field. As dusk washed lavender over the valley, they gathered beneath the chimney, no longer a scar, but a sentinel. Nate placed the melted rubber ball on a brick ledge. Beneath it, Luna affixed a brass plaque, "From Ash to Action, Coda's First Toy, 2018, reminding us to keep playing wind, sang through the chimney's gaps like a distant flute. Nate slid an arm around Luna. She leaned in, eyes on the shepherd whose patience had redrawn their map. "Homes shelter people," she said softly. "Fields free them." Snowflakes drifted. Coda lifted his muzzle, catching a crystal on his tongue. Nate laughed, the sound of grief melting into promise. They loaded tools and tarped the blueprint. Before Nate opened the truck door, Coda circled his namesake field once more, sniffing each stake, tail ticking approval. Headlights painted the sign golden as they drove away. Flurries whirled like sparks from fresh kindling. By sunrise, volunteers arrived. Maggie from Bitterroot Shelter, teenagers who had walked dogs through bitter winters, Benny's adoptive family with tools in hand, even a shy juror from Ava's trial. A local lumber yard delivered planks. A vet tech class hauled rolls of welded wire. The air filled with nail guns, laughter, and the high yip of a puppy discovering snow. Nate oversaw footing for the open-air barn. Luna handed out work gloves stamped with second watch. Coda patrolled, offering silent evaluations. A lick to a child's mittened hand here, a wag to a veteran adjusting a fence post there. Mid-morning, the highway gate squealed open, and a convoy from 3 shelters rolled in, each van carrying dogs who had waited longest. Seniors with silver muzzles, timid souls shaken by years of concrete echo, bonded pairs nobody wanted to split. They were met not with cages, but with a field rimmed by temporary snow fencing and the scent of cedar in the air. One by one, kennel doors swung wide. Dogs stepped out onto ash-rich soil softened by sunlight and hoofed by human footprints. At first they hesitated, pads tapping warily, but then Coda trotted forward, nose to nose with a shaky shepherd mix, shoulder to shoulder with an arthritic Labrador, setting a tempo of courage. Tails lifted like banners. Paw prints spiraled across virgin ground that smelled nothing like antiseptic or fear. A drone filmed overhead footage destined for the Second Watch channel. But the magic needed no camera. A senior husky flopped in powdery snow, throwing her muzzle to the sky. A deaf terrier chased shadows and found them good enough. Volunteers cheered, some cried. No one minded the cold. Luna called for quiet, holding up her phone, live-streaming to thousands glued to midday screens. "This," she said, panning across the field, "is what patience, persistence, and one dog who never gave up can plant in burned soil." She angled the lens toward Coda, just as he plopped into the snow, inviting a shy brindle to tackle him. Comments exploded with hearts. By late afternoon, the makeshift fencing stood firm, posts sunk deep. Straw bedding warmed the barn. Heated water buckets steamed. Nate hammered the final bracket, muscles aching good. He looked across the field to the chimney crowned with twilight. ball still perched like a red phoenix egg. Coda trotted over, sat beneath it, and stared out over dogs romping where fire once roared. For a pulse, Nate saw flame again. Only now the orange glow came from the westering sun, and its heat felt like blessing, not loss. A whistle signaled day's end. Volunteers loaded empty kennels back into vans, symbolic cargo now, and promised to return with gravel, turf seed, and time. Coda herded stragglers into the barn, then joined Nate and Luna at the truck. Snow squeaked under boots and paws. The chill sharpened every exhale into silver fog. Before climbing in, Nate paused beneath the cedar sign. He thought of Ava, safe because a dog lent her his heartbeat, of Benny, curled on a child's bed tonight, of every letter from classrooms asking, "What can we do?" He touched the carved words, "A place where waiting ends," and answered under his breath, "Build fields, not walls." Coda nudged his leg, impatient to ride home. Nate opened the door. The shepherd sprang inside, though not without a final look across his kingdom of second chances. The dashboard clock read 1847. Luna jotted it for the project log. First official play session concluded. 16 dogs exercised, 0 gates locked. As the truck rumbled down the mountain road, headlights swept the valley where foundation stones glittered under frost. In every beam, Nate saw outlines of tomorrow. Agility ramps painted bright blue, picnic tables under summer leaves. A reflection trail that wound through pines whispering, "You are safe. You are seen." He glanced at the rearview mirror, watching Coda's ears flick with each bump in the track. "Mission accomplished?" he asked. The shepherd's tail thumped once affirmation, oath, heartbeat, echoing through a night no longer haunted but wide open for whatever dawn chose to bring. The postmark on the envelope read, Burlington, Vermont. Blue ink blurred by weather, edges bowed as if the letter had sailed through storms to reach Nate on this snowy early March morning. He found it in the battered roadside mailbox outside his mountain cabin, wedged between hardware store flyers and an overdue power bill. What arrested him was not the lack of a return address, but the handwriting careful loops, patient slants, the script of someone who'd paused to steady heartbeats before pen met paper. In thick blue ink the front read, "To whoever has Coda." No name, no street, just faith that the world would carry its message. Nate slipped the letter into his coat, thinking he'd open it over coffee. But curiosity tugged harder than the wind off the ridgeline. A quick whistle cut the air. The German shepherd, trotting through ankle-deep snow toward volunteers, assembling agility ramps, paused mid-stride and bounded back. Snow dusted his muzzle. Amber eyes glowed against the white. Nate sat on an upturned paint bucket inside the half-framed welcome shed and broke the seal. A smaller cream envelope slid free, flap closed by a cat sticker. Inside lay a photo. A shepherd puppy, ears half upright, licking peanut butter from a freckled girl's cheek. The pup's paws were enormous, the girl's front tooth missing, their joy sunlit and timeless. Coda sniffed the picture, ears pricking as if scent could cross years. His tail swept a ponderous arc. Behind the photo rested a folded sheet. "If you're reading this, my letter found the dog I've searched for since I was 12. We called him Bear. After my parents divorced, he vanished into paperwork I couldn't trace. Last month I saw Coda on TV guiding rescuers to that missing girl. I knew him by the white patch under his chin as frosting. I don't need him back. I just needed to know he's alive and loved. If you can, please send a picture so I can pin it beside this one. MS." Snow rattled the roof. Coda pressed his head to Nate's knee. "You had another name," Nate whispered. The dog's tail thumped identities layered, none lost. Luna slipped in, cheeks flushed. Nate handed her the page. Tears glimmered before she reached the postscript. "We have to write back," she said. He nodded, already picturing a photo of Coda beneath the sign that read Coda's Field. By mid-April, the mailbox had become a reliquary. Envelopes, postcards, Polaroids, all marked for Coda. Each morning, Nate and Luna emptied the haul onto the porch harvest table while Coda lounged below, listening to paper whisper lives he'd brushed without knowing. One letter read, "I was the guy who walked away. 3 years ago, I almost adopted Coda, but feared losing an older dog too soon. Seeing him guide rescuers showed me regret hurts more. Last week, I adopted a gray-muzzled lab mix named Chance. Thank Coda for proving bravery grows with age. Sam T." A twine-tied bundle spilled Polaroids of vacant kennels, staff beaming. Maggie wrote, "Since Coda's story aired, our long-timers find homes in 6 weeks." A hospital envelope carried Ellie's mother's note. "The rescued girl now sleeps through the night, clutches Coda's picture, and wants to plant flowers at the field for kids who get lost." Letters came from a veteran who testified about his trauma after watching Coda in court, a retiree who began shelter work, and second graders who held a penny drive for chew toys for dogs who waited polite like Coda. Ink, wet pine, and laughter mingled on the porch. At dusk, Nate stored every note in a cedar chest Luna had stenciled with paw prints. On the lid she burned, "Echoes of Coda," voices he unlocked. Nate met Coda's amber eyes. "You turned waiting into motion," he murmured. The shepherd's tail swept softly, like pages turning. Spring unfurled. Volunteers raised fencing, propped kennel doors open, and strung lights over fresh grass. Soon dogs who'd endured long seasons behind bars would arrive, and Coda would guide them from stillness into beginning. Inside the finished welcome shed, shelves held blankets and biscuits. Luna arrived with a slim package. Nate unwrapped a sunrise-colored hardcover, The Dog Who Waited by Luna Reyes and Coda, watercolor of the shepherd beneath a starry sky. They settled on a braided rug. Nate opened the dedication. "For everyone who ever felt forgotten, and for the 4 paws who prove waiting can be heroic." His voice filled the cedar walls, a lonely kennel under moonlight, a digital whisper, a forest clearing where courage wore fur. Coda followed every illustration, eyes reflecting stove fire. When Nate reached the spread of Coda guiding Ellie, the shepherd rested a paw on the page. Nate laughed, wonder cracking through emotion. Closing the book, he hugged Luna. Over her shoulder, Coda curled against his side. "You gave his story a forever home," Nate said. "You both did," Luna replied. She set the book on a stand near the stove. Its cover caught firelight like sunrise trapped in glass. Nearby leaned a hand-painted sign. "Story Corner. Come read to the dogs." Local kids would soon visit, their voices stumbling while canine ears listened. "Will you read this at the first session?" Luna asked. "It started with them," Nate said. "They deserve to hear how it ends." Night slipped lavender over the clearing, but inside the shed a beacon glowed story on paper, story in flesh. Somewhere in Vermont, MS would open her mailbox, see her puppy grown into legend, and know love like ink is indelible once it sets. For now, Nate sat between friend and partner, warmth from the stove settling into bone. He listened to Coda's steady breathing, each exhale a punctuation mark on an unfinished tale. Outside, budding aspens whispered, "Endings written well are invitations to begin again." Sun crowned the ridgeline in a blaze of spring gold as a lavender ribbon stretched across the new gate of Coda's Field 6, rescued Montana acres, now bright with lupine, clover, and the expectancy of beginnings. Volunteers in second watch shirts lined the fence rails, disbelief and pride shining in equal measure. A bluegrass duo strummed under the log beam pergola. The smell of grilled veggie kebabs drifted across straw bale benches. At 10:01, Luna raised a microphone that trembled in her grip. "Welcome," she said, voice floating on the pine-scented breeze. "Today we open a place where waiting ends in running and every heartbeat counts." Applause rolled through the timber like thunder finally set free. Nate knelt beside Coda, silver-muzzled but steady, Benny the pit mix at his flank. At a gentle nudge of Coda's nose, Nate clipped the novelty scissors through satin. The ribbon fluttered to grass. Cheers rose, cameras flashed, and the gates swung wide. A parade of senior dogs poured through, Jasper the one-eyed beagle baying at everything. 3 geriatric chihuahuas scurrying like a single scrappy organism. Daisy, a deaf husky who felt jubilation through vibrating earth. Paw prints stitched first impressions into loam where ash had once blown. Children filed into Story Corner, clutching picture books. A freckled boy cracked open The Dog Who Waited. Words wobbled, then steadied, as Coda sank between him and Tara, a trembling shepherd mix. Story vines coiled around fear and coaxed it into bloom. Near the agility course, Ellie Winters knelt in a garden bed beneath a sign that read, "For kids who get lost and the dogs who find them." She pressed marigold seedlings into soil, pausing to kiss Coda's nose when the elder shepherd inspected her work. Under the lone chimney that survived last year's wildfire, Sheriff Arlen unveiled a bronze plaque set in fieldstone. "No dog will ever wait alone again." Silence swept the field. Coda sat before the plaque, tail brushing grass. Nate laid a hand on his partner's withers. "This isn't a memorial," he told the crowd, voice thick yet sure. "It's a promise patience is a seed, and love is the rain that makes it rise." Sunlight broke through clouds on cue. Blossoms of applause followed. By late afternoon, adoption papers for 3 seniors were signed, a dozen more pending. Yet numbers felt small beside the single indelible image, Coda patrolling at sunset, his shadow braided with those of newly liberated dogs, guardian of a gate now forever open. Spring blurred into gentle routine. Dawn kennel releases, children reading beneath cottonwoods, twilight perimeter checks. Coda moved through it all like an elder statesman, dignified, deliberate, savoring each task. Everyone felt the soft ticking beneath his coat. Slower rising ribs, a longer pause before standing. Silver, now pure snow at his muzzle. Late May delivered warm evenings and meadowlark songs. One night, after volunteers left and lanterns glowed along the rails, Nate spread a quilt on the porch. Benny snored in straw. Luna poured chamomile. Stars pricked the cobalt sky while Coda leaned against Nate's thigh. Both men and dog lulled by crickets and far-off coyote yips. Nate whispered thanks into the fur between Coda's ears. Thanks for every frightened pup coaxed outside, every child rocked from nightmare to hope. After midnight, moonlight silvered the floorboards. Nate woke to emptiness on the quilt, found Coda stretched peacefully on his favorite rug, chest still beneath lantern glow. No struggle, no gasp, only a quiet choosing. He knelt, pressed trembling fingers to cooling fur, tears dropping before words formed. "I thought I rescued you," he whispered, voice cracking. "But you rescued me." Drawn by intuition, Luna entered, understanding instantly. She rested a hand on Coda's paw as Benny padded in to nose the shepherd's cheek. They stayed until dawn painted the horizon blush pink. They carried Coda to the chimney garden, lantern guiding steps. Volunteers arriving early formed a silent ring. Maggie placed the melted red ball by his chest. Ellie tucked marigolds around his paws. A veteran laid a folded flag patch. Letters, retired collars, and a child's crayon portrait of a haloed shepherd followed. They buried him beneath cedar shavings as sun cleared the ridge. A smooth river stone to mark the spot. Coda, the dog who waited, the heart who led us home below, Luna carved his mantra. You are never too old, never too forgotten, to become someone's hero. That evening, Benny stretched beside the fresh mound, Nate's arm draped over the pit mix's shoulders, while field lights blinked alive. Everywhere life continued, dogs chasing twilight fireflies, kids laughing through syllables, and Coda's promise pulsed on the bronze plaque, warm in lantern glow. Summer unfurled like a green banner. Lupine and paintbrush splashed color across ground once charred. Volunteers crushed mint leaves so anxious dogs could breathe calm. The sensory trail thrummed with bees. Agility ramps thudded under graying paws, rediscovering flight. Word spread. Shelters from Idaho to Iowa phoned weekly, asking space for their longest waiters aboard the Coda caravan. Each arrival stepped onto grass as if turning an unwritten page. Maggie kept a bell at the shed. Every clang celebrated a new home and another photo for the no longer waiting wall. In classrooms from Missoula to Miami, teachers read, "The Dog Who Waited." Children traced printed paw prints, whispering morals their hearts already knew. A boy in Ohio asked whether old shelter dogs lived nearby. His class launched a pen pal project with Second Watch, sending letters read aloud during evening rounds. Nate's cedar box of echo letters overflowed with crayon capes, starlit shepherds, constellations shaped like hope. Some nights he read them at Coda's grave, Benny curled close, fireflies blinking approval. Luna funneled her grief into growth. Grant proposals under twinkle lights, conference pitches, donations blooming like asters. Funds built a visitor lodge for far-flung adopters, a therapy wing where veterans could bunk beside training dogs, and the waiting gallery, a glass front hall charting Coda's journey from shadowed kennel to hero, ending in a mirrored panel captioned, "Every hero starts as a watcher of hope." Lanterns looped between spruce branches as pilgrims gathered beneath a lavender sky. Ellie, taller now, read her proclamation. Coda taught me bravery is sometimes a quiet dog staying until sunrise. Sam T. arrived with Chance, now joined by a second senior dog, two clangs of the adoption bell. Mara Winters laid a fresh marigold on the grave, whispering her daughter's newest bedtime joke for Coda's ears. By the chimney, the bronze promise caught lantern light. Luna's hands trembled around a microphone. Nate stood beside her, Benny pressing close. "Some of you met Coda in person," Luna began. "Some met him through a book, a news clip, or a child's bedtime telling. However he found you, he asked for the same thing. Believe that patience can bloom into purpose." She glanced toward the grave, eyes shimmering. "Tonight we celebrate not an ending, but the living roots of that belief." Dogs padded through grass under fairy lights, Children read space adventures to whiskered audiences. Volunteers brushed coats soft with nutrition and unmeasured love. Every few minutes the bell rang, and each ring sounded like a heartbeat continuing. Nate accepted the mic. "Someone once told me," he said, voice gravel thick, "you're never too old, never too broken, never too forgotten to become someone's hero." He looked to a sky dusted with early stars, imagined Coda's constellation settling into place, an eternal sentinel glowing above the sanctuary he'd inspired. He lifted his hand. The crowd mirrored him, palms open to the night as if releasing lanterns made of breath. Together, in child squeaks and martial baritones, they recited Luna's closing line, the one stamped forever on the field stone, the one kids now chant in playgrounds and shelter aisles from Vermont to Vancouver. "You are never too old, never too broken, never too forgotten. You are still someone's hero." A hush followed, not emptiness, but the full, quiet thrum of a promise kept. Wind brushed the lupine. The bell on the shed door rang one more time, and across 6 bright acres every waiting soul, human, hound, or hope felt the rhythm Coda had started. Steady, patient, unstoppable. Coda's journey reminds us that every heartbeat, no matter how aged, scarred, or overlooked, carries the power to rewrite lives. In the gentle eyes of a German shepherd, we find lessons bigger than courage, patience that waits without bitterness, loyalty that survives disaster, and love that multiplies the moment it is shared. When one dog steps from darkness into freedom, he lights a path for children learning empathy, for seniors rediscovering purpose, and for forgotten animals still standing behind shelter bars. His legacy, echoed in wagging tails and signed adoption papers, proves that hope is a living chain, each link forged by simple acts, reading to a shy pup, planting marigolds for the lost, choosing the elder dog who waits the longest. Let Coda's story call us to guard the quiet lives that depend on human kindness. In doing so, we honor every German shepherd who ever stood watch and every animal whose silent trust invites us to become the heroes we were waiting for all along.